Hi everyone, welcome back to Tech Booth. Today, some tips on choosing your very first professional camera. So you've decided that you want to take your photography to a higher level by buying a professional camera, and you've really convinced yourself that you need a professional camera. What are some of the things that you need to consider? Well, the very first thing, and this will serve you well as you grow in your photography, is to always tell yourself you do not need another camera. This is good enough. You may be wondering why I'm saying that, but my advice to you as the first tip in getting a new camera is the best camera you can have is the one that you already have or the one that you can afford. Whether that is a phone or a point and shoot, it doesn't really matter. There are some things that you need to learn with the equipment that you already have that you will use regardless of what equipment you have. So you can have a $100 camera or a $10,000 camera. There are things that you must teach yourself in photography, in videography, technical and also creatively, that you will use regardless of the equipment that you're going to buy, regardless of the camera that you're going to have. So that's the very first thing that you need to make sure that you do. Learn to take the best photos and shoot the best video that you can with what you already have. Some of the things that you need to learn, whether you have a phone or a point and shoot, before you even think of getting a professional camera, are things like what is good exposure, what is good framing, what is the best time of the day to take your photos, and where should people stand, say if you're taking photos in direct sunlight. Those things, doesn't matter what camera you have, those things will still apply to each and every camera that you're going to buy. The real question you should be asking yourself is, how can I take better photos? How can I take better videos? Is it necessary for me to get this new equipment for me to get better? Have I pushed myself to the limit of the equipment that I already have? And if you ask any experienced photographer or videographer, they'll tell you that there's always something new on the market. And the temptation is always to try and get that new thing, thinking that it will make you better. But that is not necessarily true. So make sure you take the best photos, shoot the best video with what you have until you get to the limit of that equipment before you start thinking of getting another camera or some more equipment to add. So that's my first bit of advice. You don't need new equipment. You need to do better in what you are doing. An amateur with a $10,000 camera will always be beaten by a professional with a $500 camera. And the difference is in how you use that equipment. Do you really need the new camera? If the answer is yes, then let's go on to point number 2. So point number 2, one of the most frequently asked questions by new photographers is, which make, which model should I buy? To answer that simply, any make or model of camera, as long as you're dealing with the major brands like Canon or Sony, Panasonic, or even Nikon, you can get any of those cameras and you'll be very happy with what you get from them. They all produce very good results. A few decades ago, it used to be which is better, Canon or Nikon, because those were the major brands on the market. And now you also have Sony, and you also have Lumix, you have Fuji, and it becomes really confusing. If you go on YouTube and you try and go through all the videos that do reviews for all these cameras, you can go away feeling really overwhelmed because some of the things that they talk about are so technical. So it goes back to point number 1. If you have taught yourself some of these technical things with whatever you have, then you'll be better at understanding what they are saying in those reviews. But a lot of times those reviews are done by professional photographers, and the things that they're talking about and the differences don't really matter at this stage in photography as you're starting off. You'll see people saying, oh, I dumped my Canon for a Nikon because of ABC. Someone else says, I dumped my Nikon for a Sony because of ABC. Most of those people are very experienced photographers and videographers, and there are some very specific things that they are looking at, nitpicky things that they are looking at that have made them change from one camera to the other. But for starting off, don't let that stop you from getting your first camera. And now things are even worse, because you not only deal with make and model of cameras, you're now having to deal with two different types of camera systems. One is called the DSLR system. That's the normal one that everyone knows. And the newer one is called the mirrorless cameras. So within each brand, you have DSLRs and you have mirrorless cameras. So I won't go into the difference between a DSLR and a mirrorless. You can find some videos online for that. But my advice in this point number 2 is don't worry yourself too much about make and model and camera system, because it doesn't really make that much of a noticeable difference for you at this stage. What you need to do is look at your budget and get what you can afford. But also, if you have friends that use a particular brand and they feel that's the one that you should use, that's fine. And it also helps that as you start using different lenses, if you have friends that are already using that camera, then they can always lend you their lenses to do your photography or videography. If you feel like you really need to settle on a brand, then one of the things you can do in areas where this is available, there are places where you can rent cameras, rent it out, try it out and see, compare for yourself and see which one you prefer to use. Or instead of buying something new, go out and look at used equipment and buy used equipment at a cheaper price, so that if you don't like it, you're not going to lose so much money, because this is quite a huge investment. So all the brands are really good. Just look at your budget and get what you can afford. But let's go on to point number 3, and this might affect which brand you go for. When you get a professional camera like this one, remember it's made up of the lens and the body. You can buy this on its own and you can buy this on its own. But usually if you're a beginner photographer, you would buy this as a kit. And so this is actually called the kit lens because it comes with the camera. That's cheaper to get. But remember, it's a lens and a body. So once you buy a Canon camera, you are going to have to buy Canon lenses or lenses made for Canon cameras by third-party lens manufacturers. You cannot use this lens on a Sony camera. You cannot use this lens on a Nikon camera because of this connection that you have right here. Not unless you have an adapter that you can buy to be able to match different cameras, but otherwise you cannot use Canon lenses on other brands' cameras. So what does this mean? That means you're buying into an ecosystem. I like to call it an ecosystem. And you're going to be buying different lenses as you progress in your photography for your camera. And the investment that you put into lenses is quite big. Some of these lenses cost 2, 3, 4 times the cost of the body of the camera. So the lens itself is a huge investment in your photography. So you end up collecting lenses for a particular brand that you cannot use on other brands. That kind of locks you in to that brand of camera, unless you have a lot of money to spend where you can buy another different brand and start collecting lenses for that brand as well. So that's something you really need to look into. Once you've chosen the brand, you are kind of locked in because you don't want to be spending so much on different types of lenses. In fact, what they say is it's better to buy a cheaper camera body and then put more money into buying very good lenses for your photography. The next point has to do with what you're going to be using your camera for. These days you get what are called hybrid cameras like this one. It does both video and stills and still photography. And the requirements for video are a bit different from the requirements for photography. There are things that you need for video production that you don't necessarily need for stills production. And so as you're buying your camera, for example, I'll give an example of what I use. I have a GH5 that I'm using to shoot this video, and I chose the GH5 because I mainly do video work, and the GH5 was designed specifically for people who do video work, and there's some tools and menus that specifically apply to video production that you won't find in some other cameras that are mainly for stills, like microphone connections and headphone connections, which are necessary for video production, and you need to look into those things. If you're going to be using your camera mainly for vlogging, for example, where you are moving around and you're holding the camera, then you want something that has really good autofocus. Sony and Canon make really good autofocus systems. Having said that though, remember I told you I chose my GH5 because I do mostly video work, but my video work is out in the field and I'm often asked by clients to also do photography at the same time. And I really found the GH5 to do amazing in videos, and I love the photos, even though people will tell you the photos from the GH5 are not so good. For my purposes and for what I do, it gives me really good quality photos as well. So it just depends. Think about what you're going to be using your camera mainly for, and then you will see what features you need in that camera, and then use those features to choose which camera you want to buy. So let's review. First of all, take time to learn to use the equipment that you already have. Don't always be looking to buy new equipment, because new equipment does not translate into better photography or better videography. It's you who makes the photos. It's you who takes the video, and it's your creativity and your mastery of your equipment that is going to help you to get the best product out of whatever you have. So ask yourself, how can I become a better photographer? That's it. Those are my few pointers on how you can start looking at buying your first professional camera. And there are many other resources out there that you can use, but hopefully these few pointers give you a starting point on what to start thinking about as you consider going into professional photography or videography. So make sure you subscribe, hit the bell notification, and see when I upload my next video to help you start off in this media business, whether it's photography or videography or audio production. See you next time on Tech Booth.